channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight on GB News, an exclusive, we show a hate cleric coming in from Bangladesh who in the past has suggested that anyone that questions the Prophet should be beheaded. Why on earth is he speaking in the UK tonight? We'll debate whether Boris Johnson's career in the Tory party is finished, whether Miss England should go back to wearing bikinis in the contest, and I'll bring you live the result of the gripping first Ashes Test match. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, our top story tonight on GB News is that 5 people inside a missing submersible in the North Atlantic Ocean have around 40 hours oxygen left. It's being reported that specialist equipment here in the UK that does have the capability to help locate those kinds of vessels has been turned down by the United States government, despite allegedly getting clearance from the MOD. So the US Navy is now involved in the search instead, and the family of the British billionaire and explorer Hamish Harding, who's on board, say they have great faith and trust in the rescue effort. Captain Jamie Frederick from the US Coast Guard said a short time ago the search is highly complex.
US and Canadian Coast Guard, Air National Guard aircraft, and the Polar Prince, which have searched a combined 7,600 square miles, an area larger than the state of Connecticut. These search efforts have focused on both surface, with C-130 aircraft searching by sight and with radar, and subsurface, with P-3 aircraft were able to drop and monitor sonar buoys. To date, those search efforts have not yielded any results. We know there's about 40 hours of breathable air left.
Well, here in the UK, Nicola Sturgeon has been speaking out on her first return to the Scottish Parliament at Holyrood since her arrest. The former First Minister of Scotland told reporters she's absolutely certain she's done nothing wrong. That's after she was arrested and released without charge following a police investigation into SNP finances. Miss Sturgeon would not say whether she should stand down from the party. A trial date has been set for January the 12th for the man accused of murdering 3 people and attempting to kill 3 others in Nottingham last week. Valdo Kalokane will enter his pleas in September. He appeared at Nottingham Crown Court today, charged with murdering 19-year-old students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, as well as 65-year-old caretaker Ian Coates on June the 13th. The 31-year-old is also charged with attempting to murder 3 pedestrians by driving Mr Coates' van at them in the city centre. A trial date has been set for Donald Trump's classified documents case. It's going to take place on August the 14th. He faces 37 criminal charges of mishandling files and is accused of keeping US national security data. Trump pleads guilty. Not guilty. I'll say that again. Donald Trump pleads not guilty to all the charges. My apologies. Now, here King Charles attended Royal Ascot for the first time as monarch this afternoon, alongside Queen Camilla. Arriving by traditional horse and carriage, the royal couple, joined by the Duke and Duchess of Wellington, waved to the crowds. His Majesty has taken over ownership of the late Queen Elizabeth's thoroughbred race horses, with several due to compete over the coming days. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every day I get people email into my website, my own website, nfarage.com. Hundreds of you email me, and sometimes you say, this is a story that you should be covering on GB News or elsewhere. And every now and again, there's one that really is a little bit special. What we got overnight was a message that a preacher who I think we could probably quite safely call a hate preacher from Bangladesh, was coming to the United Kingdom. Let me show you a little clip of Ina Abbasi talking about the 9/11 attacks.
এশিয়ার এই সিংহগুলো কত বড় মুমিন
মাসলাক ভিন্ন ইসলামের মূলে তো এক বেটা মৌলবী 50 বছর সাধনা করেও লাদেন আর মোল্লা ওমরের জুতা বহনের যোগ্যতা তোমার হবে না
Well, I think that fairly safely qualifies as being hate speech. He's also said in the past that anyone that questions the Prophet Muhammad should be beheaded. And yet, he's coming to the United Kingdom. He's doing several speeches in this country. He's come from Bangladesh. Isn't it odd? People like Laura Southern, a Canadian Conservative, get banned from coming into this country. Geert Wilders, who was an elected member of the Dutch Parliament, gets banned from coming into this country. Yet this man is here and free to tour and spread these messages. Tonight, I ask, is the Home Office asleep at the wheel? Let me know what you think. Farage@gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined now by Charlie Peters, our GB News Investigates reporter. Charlie, this one looks pretty shocking.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen the clip there of him praising the 9/11 terrorists, describing them as brave lions, and going on also to apply great praise to Osama bin Laden, saying that his followers are not worthy to carry his shoes. That, I think, as a standalone comment, should almost certainly block you from visiting Britain, certainly from giving several lectures. And he's speaking tonight in Birmingham, right now, we believe. But also we have reports that he spoke 2 days ago in Nottingham and is due to speak in London tomorrow night. So this is a speaking tour. Now, it's being hosted by a TV channel called Ion TV. They're not broadcasting the event. They are an Ofcom-regulated channel. But they did confirm to GB News over the phone that he would be speaking tonight. When we put the comments to them saying, what do you make of these comments here? Other comments made such as, describing the Queen's Young Leaders programme as evil and describing Ahmadi Muslims, a persecuted sect within the Islamic faith, as kafir, who need to be beheaded. So extreme comments. When we put it to this Ion TV channel, they said, they weren't aware of them, saying that he was an extremely popular preacher. But indeed, when we looked him up, we found plenty.
If you're a TV channel with a Sky channel, and you've got this guy coming as your guest, why wouldn't you broadcast?
Yes, indeed. And when we spoke to the venue as well, we contacted the venue in Birmingham that's hosting Mr. Abbasi tonight. They also claimed they weren't aware of his comments and actually told us that he was putting on a kind message to introduce the next generation of Islamic followers into his kind rhetoric ahead of certain Muslim holidays. Now, of course, what we've heard certainly does not replicate a message of kindness.
I mentioned Laura Southern, the Canadian Conservative. I mentioned Geert Wilders, very controversial, but an elected, member of the Dutch Parliament. There were many members in the European Parliament as well. I've asked the question of our audience, is the Home Office asleep at the wheel? Could it be they don't know about this man? Or is it more likely they're just turning a blind eye?
In recent years, they have banned Islamists from arriving. Theresa May, under her premiership, we saw Zakir Naik was blocked. He was a scholar, but also a hate preacher. And we also had another scholar blocked in 2021 from arriving from Qatar, from flying from Doha. So we do know that the Home Office has, in recent years, made these steps for radical Islamists in particular. But clearly, there are so many of these speakers that Britain has had to block over the last decade or so that it must be a struggle to keep up with it.
Let's for once be generous to the Home Office. I mean, it's a first. There was always a first on this programme. Have we written to them, Charlie? Are we looking for answers very quickly from them?
But they gave a very brief statement to say that extremism has no place in our society, adding that we work closely with law enforcement, local communities and international partners to tackle groups and individuals who sow division and hatred. It was a very brief response and did not address any of the individual comments that Dr. Abbasi had made that we had brought out to them.
Well, and John Speller, the MP, Labour MP, has been very outspoken on this.
Yes, he wants to know why the Home Office has missed it. How can we have situations where other Islamists have been blocked? And this extremely popular preacher, and it is important to note that this preacher is extremely popular. Dr. Abbasi has huge crowds following him in Bangladesh, and clearly some supporters in the Bengali community in Britain, clearly enough to put on a speaking tour. So this former Labour Defence Minister asked, are the Home Office aware of this, or are they asleep at the wheel?
John Speller, Charlie, you and I, We're all asking the same question. It could be that the Home Office didn't know, in which case we will forgive them. But please, when we raise a very specific point, raised by a GB News viewer, and thank you for doing that, don't ignore us anymore, or we'll be back on this case tomorrow. It's your job in the Home Office to keep hate preachers out. I expect between now and 7 o'clock tomorrow for some action to be taken. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Now, a fortnight ago, I said, as the newspapers were full of speculation about when would Boris's comeback be, I said I thought he was finished. And last night, by any measure, after the attempted revolution that he tried to promote within the Conservative Party, ended in humiliation. I think it was only 7 members of Parliament voting with Boris Johnson against the recommendations of the Privileges Committee. Even Jacob Rees-Mogg, who takes over from me in 45 minutes, and I'll ask him why, even Jacob abstained. I wonder, is Boris now finished as a Conservative political figure? Well, Philip Blond is a former advisor to David Cameron and very much part of that Conservative set. I was pretty bearish about Boris's chances a couple of weeks ago. It seemed to me not only, Philip, had he lost the confidence of his own parliamentary party, but when you look at the polling in the country, he's about as popular as Prince Andrew.
Yes, and it doesn't get much lower than that. Look, I think sometimes conventional wisdom is right, and conventional wisdom would have that he's finished. I think he's wildly unpopular in the country, but I think most striking is that he's unpopular in his own parliamentary party, and nobody will
But to be fair,
stand.
he never was popular amongst the parliamentary party.
He wasn't.
If you go back to early 2019, he'd voted twice against Mrs May's deal, then at third time of asking voted for it. Neither wing of the party seemed to like him in those days.
Yeah, but people didn't have to like him to back him because they thought he was a winner. I think, though, we live in an era where things are only going to get more polarised, more crises. So I think it would be a mistake to wholly count him out. He basically withdrew from the process and left to preserve his political capital. So he has an idea that he's not out.
What, you mean he ran away?
Well, in his own... his whole kind of appeal rests on the idea he's always a winner. So in his own mind, he withdrew from the contest that he thought he would lose. Remember when he went for the leadership, Gove was going to turn up, didn't. He pulled out because he didn't think he could win. So he's preserving that idea. The interesting thing is that Boris lost because basically he didn't understand what happened in the 2019 election. He got what kind of experts call the upper left quadrant vote. They wanted to move left on the economy, and by that I don't mean socialism, I mean securing the lives of working class people, of people who are below the median wage, their lives, their hopes, their economic aspirations.
Working class Brexit voters.
Well, and there were people who liked Boris who weren't even in favour of Brexit, and also wanted to move hard right culturally, so that we didn't go for kind of self-identification of women as men and vice versa. The trouble is he couldn't deliver either. No. And that's largely because his parliamentary party remains conventional 1980s Thatcherite liberals. They're both economically liberal and socially liberal. His constituency wanted a post-liberal offer economically and socially, and he couldn't deliver it. If you look in the end what levelling up is on offer, it's not even equal to the amount that's spent on managing migration.
No, I mean, Philip, I know his constituency. I know the Red Wall. They'd all voted UKIP before. These were the people, a couple of million of them, that had left Labour, voted UKIP, voted Brexit Party, voted for Boris. They now feel incredibly let down by him and by the Conservative Party.
Well, they've been let down by generations. We have structurally, on the left and the right, abandoned ordinary people because the world worked for the upper middle class and it didn't work for ordinary working people. Well, it used to be the case that people could secure a home, a family life, and some sort of future with an ordinary wage. We can't do that now.
And see a GP and expect their kids to get on a housing list.
What the Conservatives don't get is the state has to work for ordinary people because that's all they've got. And what we have now, since 2010, is a completely dysfunctional state that doesn't work on crime, doesn't work on health, doesn't really work on education, and it doesn't work. And it's OK if you've got money and wealth, but it's not if you don't. Now, here's where if Boris, because Boris remained a social liberal, and I think he tried to turn the party towards helping this constituency, but the parliamentary party isn't there. He could run as an insurgent. We could see a situation where the Conservative Party loses badly and there isn't an obvious leader. They could become, if you forgive me, like 19th century Whigs, where nobody will vote for them. Because the offer that people reject was the offer of Liz Truss, the standard kind of conventional Tory 1980s offer. That's like 5% of the country. The party is likely to congregate around that. And so then you see the possibility of the erasure on the right. So I still think it would be a mistake to count him out on the right.
Well, I'm counting him out in the Conservative Party.
I think that's right. But
and to me, Philip, I was thinking about this. I mean, he might even fancy his chances in London. I mean, the Tories have a short list of 3 to take on Sadiq Khan. Not one of them is a household name, and none of them are likely to be a household name by the time the election happens. London is an opportunity. And then I thought, actually, Boris has one big political legacy. It's that we left the European Union whilst he was Prime Minister. I think his future is outside, not inside, the Tory party.
But the future of the Tory party might not be that good, to be honest. If Labour are elected and bring in proportional representation...
Then everything changes.
Then everything changes.
Yeah.
Then you can have a situation where a small group of social and economic liberals don't control the right. And then you could have a genuinely post-liberal party on the right. And that, I'm afraid, is a political opportunity for people like Boris. And if he can attune... The tragedy with Boris is he's the only, along with Theresa May, who had a similar kind of legacy bequeathed to her, is he's the only Prime Minister who understood that there was a shift needed. And the tragedy is he couldn't pull it off. He couldn't move, say, we need to get there. He had no ability to realise how to get there.
Did he really believe in it? You see, this to me is interesting. I mean, you know, he did join the Brexit campaign, and I was very grateful to him because he helped us get it over the line. But did he really believe in it?
I don't think he believed in Brexit qua Brexit, but I do think he believed in the economic enfranchisement of ordinary people. He didn't believe in the culture wars. He was and is a social liberal.
He is a metropolitan liberal.
He's a metropolitan liberal socialist.
He is a London lovey in so many ways.
Well, London's odd, isn't it, though, because it's also the most socially conservative part of Britain. No one ever talks about this, but...
Not the upper middle class white population.
No, but in terms of population, the minority voters are religious and very conservative.
Yes.
So London is paradoxically the most liberal and the most conservative place in Britain.
Yes.
So I would say that the polarisation, the fragmentation of British politics hasn't stopped. The Conservative Party is on the brink of a historic failure because it cannot deal with reality. It remains trapped in the past. If we get Labour and if we get proportional representation, everything changes.
Yes. Well, I tell you what, I might get involved again if we get proportional representation, and it would be a very, very different world. And I wonder, final thought on that. There are some that think that PR would give us a permanent, the Daily Mail, for example, would give us a permanent centre-left majority. And yet, looking at the Brexit result in a referendum, that's not guaranteed at all, is it?
I don't think it is guaranteed. And I think that we are splitting down the middle like America. I was speaking to somebody who knows American politics very well, and they rate Trump's chances against Biden as better than the last time, which, again, is against conventional wisdom. Look, The situation for ordinary people in this country isn't going to get any better. We haven't solved the productivity crisis, so therefore we don't have the money to support people. And that goes back arguably even before the financial crisis. All of our governing classes have conventional ideas that have failed and will continue to fail. Therefore, the chances of breakup, fragmentation and entropy are very much on the cards.
I agree with you, Philip Blonde. Thank you very much indeed. And the earthquake that was Brexit, what we're seeing really are still the aftershocks. And I agree with Philip Blonde. I think in the next 5 years we could see some very, very major changes. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk mortgages. Of course we are. Ordinary folk suffering, massive squeeze on buy-to-let, because that's now become a disaster. We'll ask in a moment, how bad is the mortgage crisis going to get?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's happened. Australia have won the first Ashes test, and they've won it at 7:15 on the 5th day of the test match. I have a feeling, with 4 test matches to go, and they'll all be crammed in between now and the end of July, that this could well be 2005 all over again. Remember that? When the Ashes cricket literally gripped the country. And this is an amazing contest between two teams that are very equally matched. Yes, I'm a bit gutted that Australia won when I thought we probably would. But I tell you what, Lord's next week is going to be absolutely epic. And luckily for me, I'll be there. Now, I asked you in the light of this hate preacher that's come in from Bangladesh, is the Home Office asleep at the wheel? Some of your thoughts. Stuart says, no, not asleep, compliant and accommodating. Another says, no, that would imply they are not meaning to allow this to continue. This is deliberate. Goodness gracious me. Kevin says, it isn't just the hate preacher is a problem. Most of the attendees will be extremist in their view too. There'll be similar individuals all over the country. And one viewer says, I think they're in a coma. Well, there is great worry around these subjects, and I have to say, I think they are very much under broadcast on the other so-called mainstream channels. Now, mortgages are becoming a very, very real problem. For the first time in many, many years, those with a mortgage are seeing dramatic increases in their monthly repayments. There is, of course, an upside to this, and that is that savers are now getting a return on their cash money. I think what's really happening is we're returning to normality. Normality is an interest rate of 3 or 4 or 5%. We've been through 2 decades of almost zero interest rates. I don't believe that's benefited us one little bit. But now we are where we are, and a lot of people are facing very real problems in the short term. Well, Ben Beadle is Chief Executive of the National Landlords Association. And Ben, let's start with your sector. A lot of people over the last few years have got into the buy-to-let market. Now, some would argue they were speculators, but there is now a real problem, isn't there? Because if you've borrowed money to buy a house to let it, you can't write off the mortgage against the income. So what's going to happen?
Evening, Nigel. Well, you're right. And we've spoken about this on this show before, haven't we? This mortgage problem comes at a monumental time for the sector, where we've not only got mortgages to worry about, but we have the inability to offset our full mortgage interest against our tax returns. We have the threat of regulation. We have the threat of energy. And there will be people, like you said at the outset, who are looking across at the rates they can get at the bank and thinking, crikey, I'm not going to be kicked from pillar to post and I'll get a quiet life. I might consider that. And that's bad news for everybody.
Yeah, I think it is. And more generally, I mean, for those people who've taken out mortgages, kind of, unless you're 40 years old, you can't really remember when mortgages were expensive. I mean, how big a crisis, Ben, do you think we're headed for?
Well, I think it's going to depend what happens in a couple of days' time when we're due another review of the base rate. And I think that direction of travel is pretty much well trailed. The only way is up, it feels, to coin my favourite 80s classic. But I think the Bank of England are suggesting that the rates are going to stay high for some time. And that is going to be very problematic because, landlords and property owners don't really have anywhere else to go. We've seen rents at fairly record highs for the past decade, since the past 10 years. And that's having a devastating impact on not just renters, but also the private rented sector as a whole, where we don't have enough homes to start with. And it is a real cataclysmic crisis in the making.
It is. And yet, Ben, I made the point earlier that actually I think we are returning to normality after a 2-decade aberration, but that takes a huge amount of adjustment. I also wonder, David Cameron, George Osborne were really, really keen to push, to get new buyers into the market. Help to Buy, the big government initiative. People who didn't really have the money to buy houses were given some help to do it. And I'm guessing a lot of those people are going to be very seriously debt-trapped now.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it's also, I'm at pains to stress that bear in mind that stress testing has been in for the past 6 or 7 years. And that was kind of geared against a crisis such as these so that people would be able to ride it out. But you're absolutely right. Those sort of encouragements around, 0% mortgages, and we saw or zero deposit mortgages rather, and we saw a few weeks or so ago those being reintroduced. That doesn't seem to be the best time. What we need to see is actually a resetting of the tax system. We need to make it more beneficial to bring your home to the market and to make sure that people do have the right sort of homes in the right sort of places. And that's also a problem in itself.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, you know, the reality of this, I mean, I was talking last night in the southeast about the huge number of houses being built in Sussex and Kent at the moment, and now we've got water shortages and all the problems that go along with that. At the minute, we're building about 180,000 homes a year. It's nowhere near enough to ease any of this crisis, is it?
No, it's not. And it's also, there are different types of crisis, because there will be people that are looking at this, Nigel, and thinking, oh, well, that's good. Landlords are selling. That's going to free up homes for first-time buyers. Well, we don't have enough homes in the private rented sector anyway. Rents are at a record high, as I said, for the past 10 years. We have a crisis of confidence. So it's all well and good to shuffle the pack. But if you're reducing one sector or robbing Peter to pay Paul, actually, that's in nobody's interest, because you do need a vibrant private rented sector to turn gen rent into gen buy.
Yeah, final thought. I mean, it's very odd. Here we are on the verge of the 13th rate rise, consecutive rate rise, yet the Eurozone is now in recession, but we're still overheating with inflation. What would you say, Ben, to the Bank of England ahead of their meeting? Would you say freeze or would you say raise?
Well, I mean, given the direction of travel is for a low inflationary environment, I don't think that what anybody says is going to wash. I suspect the interest rates will go up. It's a question of by how much, whether it's 0.25 or 0.5. But I do think the government needs to take action to help renters and to help homeowners. It's no point calling in mortgage lenders for a talking shop. We need to see hard action, and we need to see tax breaks as soon as possible.
So tax breaks as opposed to bailouts, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, because bear in mind, George Osborne changed these tax breaks for landlords a few years ago, and this is exacerbating the crisis. It's not a giveaway, it's simply being able to offset your legitimate business expense off your income. Simple.
Ben Beadle, I get it. Otherwise, it's like paying corporation tax on the gross income of a company and not the net profit. I get it, 100%. Thank you for joining me. Folks, the housing crisis will get worse, I'm afraid. Now, in a moment, this is extraordinary. Church of England vicars want a pay rise. I wonder, could they even be threatening a strike? Could this be the next strike action? Could vicars be going out on strike? We'll examine all of that in just a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Britain's news channel.
So Church of England vicars are demanding a pay rise because they want to keep up with the cost of living crisis. Now, we hear this, of course, from all sorts of different sectors, and nobody for one moment would pretend that vicars were well paid. But I think it is the first time we've actually seen vicars demanding a pay rise. Well, joining me to discuss that and much more is Dr. Ian Poole, Associate Minister at St Nick's Church in Nottingham. Paul, before we begin, I must just ask about the horrendous atrocities that took place in Nottingham just a few days ago. And I wonder, has the church been playing an active role there? I hope it has over the course of the last week.
Yes, extremely active. I mean, individual congregations, diocesan leaders as well, area leaders. So they were present at the vigil the other night at the square in Nottingham, and we've been hosting prayer meetings as well. And of course, clergy, including the chaplains at the university, have been very active in praying for people. We've got a significant student section in our congregation, and for students at the university, this is something really, really shocking. And I think particularly for young people, I guess there's a sense in which young people think they kind of live forever, and so this kind of thing is a real shock to them and a real challenge. So yes, the churches have been there, been praying, of lending support, and being alongside people at every stage.
Yeah. Now tell me, Dr. Poole, you're all become a bunch of left-wing militants in the Church of England, and you're threatening strike action unless you get increased pay. Is that right or not?
No, it's not at all. And I think, as you'll be aware, Nigel, people don't go into ordained ministry in any of the churches because it's well paid. Although, of course, people say the benefits are out of this world. People are ordained because they believe that's what God's called them to, and they are called to. In the words of a report from the Church of England that I was part of actually 20 years ago, we live by, on the one hand, generosity, on the other hand, by sacrifice. There are plenty of sacrifices that you have to make, involved in ministry. I think the real difficulty is that, and I'm part of the group on Archbishop's Council who actually signs off the decisions on stipends every year. And the real problem, the questions I've been asking is, why is it that clergy stipends have been gradually drifting down? It's not been a sudden change. It's not something. I suppose this crisis has been precipitated a bit by what's happened in the last 12 months or so. But actually, over the last 10 years, clergy stipends have gradually been drifting down against pay in other areas. And it's a bit complicated because we're not actually employed, and therefore we don't actually receive a salary.
Yeah.
We are office holders, and we receive what's called a stipend. And so the discussions around the provision the church makes for ministers is actually quite complex.
OK, so no threat to strike, just a plea that you need to catch up again with perhaps where you were. I wonder, though, given the, as I see it, catastrophic leadership of Welby and declining congregations on Sunday mornings, whether maybe pay should be related to performance.
Well, yes and no, because of course what that would mean is that pay for clergy in the suburbs, where there's a higher church attendance, will be less than pay for those in inner city and outer estate ministry, which hardly seems appropriate to me. A couple of things that are really interesting, and you might or might not be aware of these facts, Nigel. Number one fact is that there are more people in a church on Sunday than are attending live football matches at every level put together, and the number isn't even close. The other really interesting fact is that more people identify in this country as Christian than watch football on TV every week. So, in fact, the Christian faith is more important in this country than football is. That's one interesting fact. The other interesting fact is that the church in this country is not in decline. The Church of England is in decline, but the church in England overall is actually not in decline, and in many places is growing. We see that in Nottingham. Some of the Church of England churches are growing, some are declining, but a lot of other churches are growing and growing quite vigorously.
Yeah, I'm seeing people. You know, where I live, I'm seeing sort of evangelical churches being very, very busy indeed. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, Ian, for joining us, and I hope you can get a satisfactory resolution.
I hope so too. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Now, a bit of good news. This cheers me up no end. The US President, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is expected to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax crimes and admit to illegally possessing a gun while a drug user. After a 5-year investigation, the US attorney in Delaware has filed papers indicating a plea agreement has been reached. He is expected to agree to drug treatment and monitoring. The terms of the agreement are likely to keep him out of jail. Well, yes, that's for now. But I have a feeling, folks, that now we're beginning to see the first charges laid against Hunter Biden may be, if there is a fair and free, independent, legal and judicial system in America, I'm hoping this is the first of many. He's got to explain how he has been able to earn millions and millions of dollars from dictatorship regimes all over the world, and to explain what the relationship between that income and the so-called big guy, his father Joe, is. It is just stunningly one-sided that it's Trump that faces a mass of legal charges, and up until this moment, the Bidens have got away with it scot-free. I have my own view where the real corruption lies. Now, you remember years ago, Miss England contest, yes, it was all bikinis and lots of skin, but that's not been the case in recent years. But now there is a debate that maybe the bikini comes back to the Miss England contest. Is that a good, joyous thing we should celebrate, or is it just, once again, returning to the objectification of women? All of that in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, decades ago, we took it for granted, didn't we? You know, Miss England contest, whatever it was, all these beauty pageants. And yes, you know, it was girls wearing bikinis and swimsuits, and nobody, it seemed to me, had any great problem with it. But that, and maybe page 3 of The Sun, and many other things, and we've had some rather different views over the course of the last few years. But it's a debate that somehow never, ever goes away, whether it's the grid girls on Formula One or whatever it is. You know, are these events where women are seen in bikinis, are these things we should celebrate, be happy about, think are joyous, or are they, as many would tell us, simply male objectification of women and potentially quite abusive? Now, it's a debate that's gone on as long as I can remember, as long as I've lived. But there is talk that the Miss England contest will now go back to the bikini. Well, let's start here with Dr. Pasha Mukherjee, NHS doctor and Miss England 2019. Now, Pasha, you have pretty strong views that we shouldn't be going back to bikinis. Why?
I actually think we should be.
You should be?
Yes.
OK.
Because I think that we're living in a very different time now. And we want to move away from female bodies being seen as from the perspective of male gaze and more rather the celebration of womanhood. Even when I participated in Miss England a few years ago, the picture of the girls that were all taking part was very different. And over the years, it's changed so much with different body types, plus-size women, women of different heights, different colour skin, and so much diversity has come through. And we really must change the idea of what looks good in a bikini or what looks good in swimwear. And it's not really about the sexualisation of women's body, but really what women's body is, it's more the confidence element of it and celebrating women's bodies in all the shapes that it comes in.
And should we, whilst we're doing this, be defining what a woman is?
Well, here's the thing. I think it's down to the choice, and that's what the competition is about. All the different rounds in the competition are by choice. It's not something that you do not get through to this round if you do not take part in this round. It's not like that. The emphasis has always been for Miss England and Miss World on beauty with a purpose. And actually, it's always been the strongest element of the competition, which is why, I mean, I was very surprised when I won myself. I did not think the people I was competing with, even in the top 5, looked very different from me. And the only thing I was holding on to was, I guess, my beauty with a purpose. And
OK, well, that's a very modern interpretation of how we would choose Miss England compared to the 1970s or the 1980s. Helena Frith Powell, author and journalist.
Yeah.
I mean, what was wrong? What was wrong with very beautiful girls appearing in bikinis?
I don't think anything was wrong with it. I mean, I think we're in agreement. I think what's wrong now is that the choice is being taken away. People are saying, you should not be strutting around in a bikini or a swim costume. That's demeaning. Well, why are you telling me what's demeaning for me? If I want to show myself off on stage, I think that's my right. And so I think it's... what's wrong is just people dictating what we should think.
Yeah, and boxing.
Yeah.
Boxing, where the girls went round the ring with the, round 5 and round 6 and grid girls on Formula One. I mean, I personally have no problem with any of it, but this is seen somehow to be demeaning to women, objectification of women, the sexualisation of women. Is it really?
My theory is that if you go into a beauty competition, you're being judged on the way you look. OK, totally agree with Beauty with a Purpose. I think that also Miss World, they do a very good job of making sure the girls are well-rounded and everything. But I do think that if you are being judged in a beauty pageant, you're being judged on your looks. And so, you know, your looks are there for display. And if you enjoy showing off your body and your looks. I think what was really sad was there was a girl called Katrina Hodge, who was Miss England, who felt that she was sort of basically bullied into this campaign against showing girls in swimming costumes, and she said she felt that she was being a bad feminist for enjoying being on stage in a swimming costume, and that's surely
which has to be risen.
Yeah.
Pasha, you know, one of the big rows that's going on in society now, and it's going on particularly in sport, is this whole trans issue, and I sort of touched on this earlier. You know, can you define what a woman is? Can a woman have a penis? It sounds ludicrous to me, and yet, you know, the leader of the Liberal Democrats said, well, obviously, yes. The leader of the Labour Party clearly doesn't even want to debate the question. I mean, would you think that a trans competitor should be allowed in a Miss England contest?
Oh, it's a very political question.
But it is the question of the day, isn't it?
I'm a woman of science, and I'm very much, I very much view the world in the science. And the way we define anything in science in general is by what majority of a particular species have in common, or majority of something has in common. And I think the large majority of the population, if you was to define it as men versus female or trans, the majority of women have a certain number of criteria that they have to meet to be classified as a woman, as a female, when they're being defined at birth.
It's fairly obvious what they are, isn't it?
Yeah, so on that note, I see, yes, of course, I understand very clearly what it means to be a woman, because that's my lived experience. Whereas I think I've never been, obviously, in the shoes of someone who's trans, and I'm sure it's a whole different experience in itself. And I don't think there needs to be any merging of the categories, because it is a category in itself. I think it's a very different experience, experiencing difficulties in defining which gender you really are in, which is not my lived experience. So it's difficult to say that my womanhood is the same as their womanhood.
So let me ask the question again. Should somebody who's trans be able to compete in a Miss England contest?
Well, I think it's that there are pageants for those categories as well, for trans categories.
So a different category?
Yes, I think so.
All right, no,
because
that's
it
an
takes
answer.
away.
Helena, how would you respond to that?
I don't think they look very good in a swimming costume.
Well, that is a purely subjective judgment.
No, I don't think they should. Just in the same way that they shouldn't be allowed to compete in women's swimming competitions, women's cycling competitions, etc., etc. I think that this is another very anti-feminist move.
And this is the interesting thing, isn't
it?
This is the interesting thing, that actually it's not women appearing in bikinis that is actually damaging women's rights. It's this, and you can call yourself actually what the hell you want to call yourself, but biology.
But don't impose.
Biology, I think, is a.
It's taking away from women's opportunities, because Miss England is not just about being on stage. It gives these girls massive opportunities in the world of various different fields. I mean, the current Miss England, she's an aerospace engineer, and she's trying to get women into STEM fields.
Yeah, no, I get it. We've moved it on from what it was, but we still, I think most people want to see very beautiful women. Thank you very much indeed for coming on and debating that and doing it in a civilised fashion. You see, it's possible to debate these tough issues in a civilised way. Now, I have got time for a couple of barrage the Farages, so here goes.
What do you guys think we can do about the cost of living? Do you guys think it's going to go worse, or it's only going to go better from here now?
I think the reality is, you know, that anybody with a mortgage is facing really, really tough times. You know, we've not seen interest rates at these levels for a couple of decades. Anybody with a mortgage, indeed anybody renting, effectively the cost of living is getting tougher and getting worse, and inflation has proved to be stickier than it is. All I really would say is that the green taxes that we put on electricity bills and everything else disproportionately hurt those on lower incomes, but they're very, very good for the rich indeed. I've got time for one more. Barrage the Farage. Let's go again.
Would you be in joining the We Party? We the taxpayer, not the tax avoider. Everything we do, we will do for the care of the country, not for money. We will have people running the government that do it for half, if not a third, of the money that the people are doing it for now. So we will show the country that we are doing it because we care. Would you be interested in joining and setting up the We Party?
Well, it's all well and good to say that MPs should do their job without being paid a bean. And if you're wealthy and successful like Jacob Rees-Mogg, you could probably afford to do it for nothing. But most people are not in that position. And there is an argument, actually, that if your local MP is earning about half of the headmaster of the local comprehensive, that actually maybe if you paid them more, you get better quality people. That one is a big debate. Now, on Thursday this week, I will be in Barnsley. Yes, the former mining town of Barnsley, a big Brexit area, and it will be, within a few hours, 7 years since that referendum. If you want to come, go to gbnews.com, because we still have a few tickets left. Come and join me in Barnsley. Michelle Dewberry will be there as well, gbnews.com. Coming up next, the very successful Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob,
Nigel.
It's an interesting question, wasn't it?
It's a really interesting question, and there's no easy answer, actually, because nobody wants to pay politicians very much. But I think we may have the worst of all worlds at the moment. I think paying politicians and then making it harder and harder for them to have outside interests has been a great mistake. You've professionalised.
It's very difficult. What
Tonight, I'm following up on what you were just saying. Really important opinion poll in The Sun this morning saying that most people are more concerned about the cost of living than net zero. Are we making people poor and we're not going to make them green anyway? And we're also going to talk about, yesterday you were on about somebody identifying as a cat.
Yes.
I'm going to identify as a GNU. And we're going to discuss what people can identify as and how ridiculous it's got.
Sometimes this channel, you know, we have Michelle being made up as a cat and Rees-Mogg's going to be a GNU. It's all too much for me. I'm going home. Let's get the weather.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here with the GB News forecast from the Met Office. If you've been affected by any of today's showers, well, they will ease through the evening with clear spells developing overnight, but further showers expected on Thursday before more widely sunshine and higher temperatures at the end of the week. Low pressure at the moment has brought areas of rain and showers across many parts of the UK. One system clears the east of Scotland, pushing into Orkney and Shetland overnight, but only as outbreaks of mainly light rain. Showers elsewhere tend to disappear, although a few will keep going across western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. Parts of Wales perhaps seeing the odd shower overnight, but otherwise clear spells. A fresher night, I think, compared with recent nights, but still warmer than average, with temperatures staying at 14-15 Celsius in the south, 12 to 13 further north. We're soon seeing those showers develop once again across Scotland and Northern Ireland on Wednesday morning, and then central and western parts of England as well as Wales. Once again, these showers will be highly localised. In some places there'll be downpour after downpour with some hail and lightning. Other places will stay dry and avoid the showers, particularly towards the southeast where temperatures will reach 27 or 28 Celsius, but fairly widely across the UK, low to mid-20s are expected away from any downpours. Showers will only keep going until about 8 or 9 p.m. and then clear spells and dry for many overnight, but it stays mild with temperatures up and down the country largely holding up in the teens and perhaps a degree or so higher compared with the forthcoming night. And so it looks like it's going to be a fairly muggy one once again, but widely sunny skies as we start off Thursday. And for many, it will stay that way into the afternoon. However, some clouds will bubble up once again, especially for parts of East Wales, into the Midlands, towards the southeast of England, and one or two for northern England. But for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, southern parts of England, it stays dry through the day on Thursday. Dry again on Friday, but more unsettled in the northwest later.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time